Have you ever walked into a room and felt someone decide you didn't belong there before you even opened your mouth? That's what happened to Evelyn Cross on a Tuesday morning in late October in the lobby of a building she had helped build from nothing. Not metaphorically, literally. The Hargrove Tower on Meridian Boulevard in downtown Charlotte had her signature on the original lease agreement, dated 11 years ago, when the entire ninth floor smelled like fresh paint and ambition and the kind of terrifying hope that only comes when you've put everything you have into something that might not work. Back then, Evelyn had parked in the loading zone because there was no visitor parking yet. Back then, the receptionist had been a retired schoolteacher named Bev who kept hard candy in a ceramic dish and remembered every name. Bev had been gone for years. The woman sitting behind the front desk now, her nameplate read Langford, K., had the posture of someone who had decided very early in life that looking busy was the same as being important. She was maybe 26, 27, with acrylic nails the color of crushed raspberries and a Bluetooth earpiece she wasn't using, but kept in anyway. She was typing something when Evelyn came through the glass doors. She didn't look up. Evelyn didn't rush her. She stood at the edge of the marble desk and waited the way she had learned to wait, not with impatience, not with defeat, but with the quiet, settled patience of a woman who had outlasted harder things than a front desk with bad manners. She was wearing her gray coat, the one with the loose button on the left cuff she kept meaning to fix. Her bag was a canvas tote from a conference in Nashville 3 years ago. Her shoes were sensible. Her hair was natural, pulled back simply. She looked, to the untrained eye, like someone's aunt who had wandered in from the wrong building. Langford K. let 30 seconds pass, then another 30. Then she looked up. "Can I help you?" The words were technically a question. The tone was not. "I have a 10 o'clock, Evelyn said. Her voice was even, unhurried. Evelyn Cross, for the executive suite on the 14th floor. Langford's eyes moved over her the way you scan a room for something you're not convinced is actually there. "Do you have an appointment confirmation?" "I do." Evelyn reached into the tote and produced a printed email. She had learned a long time ago to print things. People trusted paper in ways they didn't trust phones held up in front of their faces. Langford took the paper, looked at it, set it down without handing it back. "Who is the meeting with?" "Mr. Brennan." "On 14. Something shifted in Langford's face, not softening exactly, more like recalibrating, but it closed off again just as quickly. "I'll need to verify that," she said, and reached for the phone. Evelyn waited. She looked at the lobby while she waited. It had changed since the early days. The floors had been polished to a mirror finish that showed you your own reflection as you walked. There was a waterfall feature along the east wall now, something architectural and expensive that made a constant low sound like rain on a window. The security desk had been moved. The coffee cart near the elevators was new, or at least newer than she remembered. A young man in a green apron was arranging cups. He caught her eye and nodded, and she nodded back, and that small human exchange was the warmest thing that had happened since she walked in. "Sir, I have a woman at the front desk claiming she has a 10 o'clock with Mr. Brennan." Langford's voice had dropped, like she was reporting something mildly suspicious. "Her name is," a pause to look at the paper, "Evelyn Cross." Another pause. Langford's eyes moved to Evelyn. "Can you describe what you're here regarding?" Evelyn looked at her steadily. "I'd rather discuss that upstairs. I need to be able to tell him the nature of your visit. He knows the nature of my visit. That's why there's a 10 o'clock. The call ended. Langford set the phone down slowly, the way people do when they're trying to look like they're in control of something they're not. "He's in a meeting that's running a few minutes long. You can wait over there." She gestured at a row of low chairs near the wall. They were the kind of chairs that were beautiful to look at and uncomfortable to sit in, the design equivalent of a polite way of saying, "Don't get too settled." Evelyn sat. She took out her phone and reviewed her notes for the meeting. She had been doing this for 31 years, preparing, reviewing, arriving early, sitting in lobby chairs with bad lumbar support. You don't build 4 companies by being precious about where you wait. 7 minutes passed. Then the elevator opened, and a man in his mid-50s came out moving with the particular urgency of someone who has just been told something alarming. His name was Garrett Fowler, and he was the General Operations Director of Hargrove Consulting Group. And his face, when he spotted Evelyn across the lobby, was a complicated thing. Relief and alarm and professional embarrassment all tangled together. He crossed the floor in about 8 long strides. "Ms. Cross," he extended his hand before he'd fully stopped moving. "I'm so sorry. I just got a message that you were." He glanced at the front desk. The glance said a lot. "I apologize for any confusion. No confusion on my end?" Evelyn said pleasantly and stood. She was not a tall woman. She never had been. It had stopped mattering to her a very long time ago. They walked toward the elevator. Garrett swiped his badge. The doors opened. Behind them, at the front desk, Langford Kay was watching. Something had shifted in her face now, and it was the particular kind of shift that happens when a mistake is revealing itself in real time. When the shape of what you've done starts to become clear. Not as an accusation from someone else, but as a fact you have to sit alone with. The elevator doors closed. What Langford didn't know, and what the rest of this needs you to understand, is who Evelyn Cross actually was, and what she had built, and why that building existed at all. Evelyn had grown up in Greensboro, 3rd of 5 children. Daughter of a man who drove a delivery truck and a woman who did alterations out of the back room of their house. She had watched her mother press other people's clothes into shapes they wanted, watched her do it without complaint, watched her be invisible in the very act of making other people look good. That image never left her. She had gotten a scholarship, then a 2nd degree, then a job that paid poorly and asked everything, and she had given it everything, and then some. And then she had left and started her own thing in a rented office space in Raleigh with 2 people she trusted and a business plan she had revised 47 times. That was the beginning. The beginning had been followed by 15 years of building something. Not smoothly, not without failures, not without the specific kind of loneliness that comes from being the only woman in the room and one of the few black women in your industry who had gotten this far. She had learned to read people fast. She had learned that the way someone treats you in a lobby tells you almost everything you need to know about how they'll behave when the pressure is actually on. Hargrove Consulting had approached her 18 months ago. They had been struggling, not publicly, not yet, but internally the numbers were soft and the leadership knew it. They needed capital, and they needed a strategy, and they needed someone who had been where they were trying to go. A mutual contact had made the introduction. Evelyn had spent 3 months reviewing their books before she agreed to anything. The meeting she was here for today was the final step in a process that had been months in the making. She was here to sign an agreement that would formalize her role as a strategic equity partner. The paperwork had been drafted and reviewed and was waiting for her signature on the 14th floor. She hadn't told anyone at the front desk that. Why would she? She had a 10 o'clock. That should have been enough. Upstairs, the conference room had a view of the city that stretched out wide and clear, and the morning light was doing something beautiful to the skyline, and Evelyn stood at the window for a moment before sitting down. She always did this in whatever room she was in. She took a moment to look at the view. It had taken her years to understand why. She thought now that it was something her mother had never been given the chance to do. Stand at a window and look out. Take a moment that was entirely yours. So she always took it. Garrett Fowler sat across from her, and a woman named Cecile Marsh, who was the company's legal counsel, sat to his left, and there were 2 others whose names Evelyn already knew and noted without making a production of it. The documents were on the table. Coffee had been brought in. They talked for 40 minutes. Evelyn asked questions that made the lawyers pause and look at each other. Not because the questions were aggressive, but because they were precisely the right questions. The kind that came from someone who had read everything and remembered all of it. She made two small requests for language changes in the contract. One was accepted immediately. One required a brief side conversation. Both were resolved. Then she signed. And what had been one thing became another thing. That was how it always worked. One signature, one moment. And the weight of what it meant settled into the room quietly, the way important things do, without fanfare, without drama. Garrett shook her hand. Cecile shook her hand. There was coffee and a brief conversation about the integration timeline. And then Evelyn said she needed to get to another appointment by noon, and she meant it, and they knew she meant it, and that was that. She took the elevator down alone. When the doors opened on the lobby, Langford K. was still at the desk. She was talking to someone, a FedEx driver dropping off a package, and she didn't notice Evelyn immediately. Evelyn walked toward the exit. She passed the coffee cart. The young man in the green apron was there still, wiping down the counter. "Have a good one," he said. "You too," she said, and meant it. She was 4 steps from the glass doors when she heard Langford's voice. Not directed at her, not exactly, but loud enough to carry. "That lady was here for like an hour. I couldn't even figure out what she wanted." The FedEx driver made a non-committal sound. Evelyn stopped. She turned around slowly. Langford looked up and saw her standing there, and the color changed in her face. Not dramatically, but the way a light changes when a cloud passes over it. Evelyn walked back to the desk. She didn't hurry. She set her canvas tote down on the edge of the marble surface, the same way she'd set it down an hour and 45 minutes ago. And she looked at Langford, K., with a look that was not unkind. It was, if anything, tired, not of this particular moment, but of the 10,000 moments like it that had preceded this one over the course of her life and career. "I want to tell you something," Evelyn said, "and I want you to hear it, not as a threat, and not because of who I am or what I signed upstairs this morning. I want you to hear it as something true." Langford was very still. "You decided what I was the moment I walked in," Evelyn said. "You decided I was confused, or in the wrong place, or not someone worth treating with basic courtesy. You decided all of that before I said a single word. And the part that I want you to actually think about, not today, maybe, but at some point, is that you would have been wrong about me even if I had nothing. Even if I had no meeting, no signature, no connection to this building at all. You still would have been wrong. Because the measure of how you treat someone should not be what they can do for you." Langford opened her mouth, closed it. "I'm not going to ask to speak with your manager," Evelyn said. "I'm not going to file a complaint. I'm going to walk out that door and go to my next meeting." She picked up the canvas tote. "But I'm going to ask you to sit with what just happened, and I'd like to think that means something." She turned and walked toward the glass doors. They slid open. The morning air came in, cool and specific, the smell of October in a city, exhaust and leaf, and something almost sweet underneath it all. She didn't look back. 3 days later, Garrett Fowler sent her an email. It was professional and carefully worded. He said there had been a review of front desk procedures and a personnel matter that had been addressed, and he wanted to make sure she had been left with a positive impression of the organization going forward. Evelyn read the email once. She wrote back, "Thank you, Garrett. I have every confidence in the team upstairs. Let's focus on the integration kickoff." That was all she said about it. Because that was the thing about Evelyn Cross that people who misjudged her could never quite understand. She didn't carry these moments forward like trophies. She didn't need the apology to be bigger than it was. She didn't need anyone to grovel or perform remorse for the camera. She needed to do her work, and she needed to do it well, and she needed to be able to walk into a building on a Tuesday morning without having to justify her presence before she'd been given the chance to open her mouth. That was the thing she needed. It was also, she had long ago accepted, the thing that was hardest for the world to give her. I think about Evelyn sometimes, about what it costs, quietly and continuously, to be someone who gets underestimated and has to choose every single time what to do with it. Whether to correct the record loudly or let your work speak. Whether to educate the person in front of you or conserve the energy you need for the room upstairs. Whether to be angry, which is valid, or strategic, which is also valid, or generous, which takes a kind of strength most people can't imagine. She chose generosity in that lobby. She didn't have to. She had every right to be furious. She had every right to make a call from the elevator that would have had a very different outcome. She chose to say a true thing plainly, and then she walked out the door. I keep coming back to one question. How many Evelyns are there, right now, sitting in those uncomfortable lobby chairs, not because they wandered in from the wrong building, but because someone behind a desk decided they didn't belong before the morning had even started? And how often do those stories end with a signed contract on the 14th floor? Not often enough, not nearly often enough.